Malarchuk came close to losing his life playing the game that he loved, ice hockey, when an accident left him with a severed jugular vein. He bounced back, but the inner demons that drove him to be a champion on the ice made his life outside hockey a struggle that almost destroyed him a second time. Joining us from his home in Nevada is Clint Malarchuk. Hey Clint, how are you, pal?
Howdy, Kevin. Good to see you.
First, tell all the viewers, how did you start playing hockey?
My dad was a goalie, hockey player. My uncles, my cousins, my big brother, who was 7 years older, so I got that to aspire to, not just hockey, but to be a goalie was huge.
From an early age, you're dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression. Clint, are you comfortable talking about all that?
Yeah, Kevin, the childhood was rough. Back then they didn't really diagnose you with mental illness unless you were really off the charts. And I look back now just in reflection, and even then I didn't feel normal as a kid. Yes, I did have an abusive father, great guy, but when he drank, and which was often, and it was a bad situation. So I had a lot of anxiety. I had obsessive compulsive disorder, undiagnosed for sure, but I look back now and go, whoa. I did contamination things, shower, washing, hand washing, which is the first thing you think of when you talk about obsessive compulsive disorder. But fortunately, I was able to funnel my obsessive thoughts and anxiety into hockey. And I just wanted to be an NHL goalie. Growing up in Canada, northern Canada, way north, we had long winters and snowbanks and around the rink and parents on the snowbanks, and it was a culture. It was a lifestyle. I started working out very young when other kids were out, playing or whatever they were doing. I don't know, because I was doing push-ups and sit-ups and running up and down stairs and doing things that would help me be a better goalie.
Wow. So right from the start, you're channeling your OCD into an obsession, playing hockey and how to be the best at it. And that fortitude and hard work paid off when, after all these years of dreaming about playing in the NHL, you end up playing for the Quebec Nordiques. Well, that was back in the mid-'80s, right? And then you were traded to the Washington Capitals. After that, you got a chance to go to upstate New York and play for the Buffalo Sabres. So tell me this, Clint, what happened when the Sabres played the St. Louis Blues on March 22nd, 1989?
March 22nd, 1989. It was the beginning of a long, long history of Clint Malarchuk, Kevin. Cut my jugular vein, playing for the Buffalo Sabres.
Now, just to explain, when you say you cut your jugular vein, to our audience, what he's saying is, when Clint is a goalie, he's trying to block the net, right? The hockey puck's coming in, but two guys are rushing fast. They get tangled up, their skates fly up, hits his neck, cuts him. 7 liters of blood are going all over.
And we're not gonna show that.
And that's very wise, because it's very graphic. So, Clint, how serious was it, man?
I'm bleeding out profusely. Blood, the first couple heartbeats, the blood squirted about 6 feet in front of me, and then it just poured out of me like a drinking fountain. And I knew I was probably gonna die. Had it not been a major sporting event, I probably would have died.
So this is a very important part for our audience. Clint, tell us what saved your life that night.
There's a lot of factors that went into that. The accident happened at the end of the ice where we exit, in our dressing room, our locker room was right there. Our team doctor was right there. A lot of people in Buffalo said, what a courageous guy. He got up off the ice and skated off. Well, that goes back to my childhood, how I was raised. You don't lay on the ice. But the real reason I got up was I thought I was dying, and I didn't want my mom to see me die. She was watching the game on TV up in Canada. And I didn't want that. And also I thought, well, they called for a stretcher. I said, a stretcher? I'm bleeding to death. That's not happening. I'm gonna pass out any minute and I'm gonna die. So traumatically, it was trauma.
And it was the team's athletic trainer that actually saved your life, because he'd been an Army medic.
He was a Vietnam medic And he, in front of 18,000 people in the auditorium or the rink, the arena, and how many people are watching on TV, and he kept his cool. He'd seen this stuff before, and with that he was able to be calm and save my life.
Wow. So after having a close call like that, what's it like getting back in the game?
Coming back was really tough. It was kind of emotional in certain ways. I remember my first game, I played the last 5 minutes of a game. They threw me in there. And the standing ovation that I got, I can't even believe I played the rest of the game because I was just shaking. It was so emotional.
But that had to have been hard.
I think it was the following season that was even tougher because the media was still questioning me. And it was a situation where, again, I was trying to prove people wrong, media wrong, coaches wrong, management wrong, fans wrong, but more importantly, me wrong. Deep down, I know I could do it, but I did have a lot of anxiety of what if they're right. But it was the next season where things really fell apart. All that love and adrenaline, the love never went. I mean, I love upstate New York and Buffalo and the people there, the greatest people in the world, the most humble, friendly, and they embraced me, and I used that. But now I'm kind of felt like I was on my own because all that had kind of worn off, at least in my head. And it was a situation where I started to have flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks, my OCD, which was totally undiagnosed. So I think it's important, Kevin, that people understand what trauma can do to you. And I didn't know it at the time. I learned this years later, that trauma can, if you're predisposed or have a certain level of, let's say, in my case, mental illness, depression, anxiety as a kid, and up until the accident, OCD, all those things exploded. And trauma will do that.
Right. It just snowballs. I mean, you've got this PTSD from the accident.
I wake up straight up in bed just like they do in the movies, like grabbing my neck and sweating, and I'm doing this every night. So I would eventually say, I don't want to live that. It's not like a bad dream. This is reliving a trauma. And I'm doing this all in silence, all on my own. And I didn't tell anybody because of the stigma, a lot of reasons, but mainly the stigma, being judged, saying, okay, you can never be an NHL goalie again. I was devastated on a lot of levels because now I'm going to the minors after, whatever it was, 11, 12 years in the NHL that I worked so hard to get to. And I thought my NHL days are done. So my first game in the minors, I let in 4 goals on something like 6 shots. It was in San Diego, California with the San Diego Gulls. I get pulled after the first period and I sat on the bench with a towel over my head and just cried. I mean, wept. I couldn't watch the game. I thought, I can't even play in the minors. But it's like it's two things. I lived for hockey. Hockey was my everything. But on the other hand, I had all this mental illness and things. So it was kind of like I didn't care about the hockey that I loved so deeply and worked so hard to get to. And then I'm just struggling so deeply and suicidal. So after the game, our coach, Rick Dudley, longtime player, executive coach in the NHL, I went in and he was a friend. And I said, Rick, I got to retire. I'm done. And Rick said, what do you mean? I said, I can't even function. He goes, hey, it's a bad game. Don't worry about it. You'll bounce back. You'll be back in the NHL. I said, Rick, no. Rick didn't understand that I'd still been struggling. He thought I was just coming down to get my conditioning stint in and go back to the NHL. No, I was so far deeper and darker than that. So Rick said, well, we'll get you into a doctor. And I said, Rick, I'm 2.5 years I've been seeing doctors, specialists, medications. He said, well, let's see what we can do. So he got me into a doctor, and it was funny, this doctor was different than the others. He's a psychiatrist, and I remember him saying, you know, you're gonna be fine, son, you're gonna be fine. You have a chemical imbalance, just like a diabetic has a chemical imbalance of the pancreas. Insulin levels is a chemical imbalance. Yours is of the brain. You got a chemical imbalance of the brain. I said, no kidding, I'm a goalie. But he got me on some medication, and I remember these medications take 4 to 6 weeks to kick in, and if they don't work, then you got to go on another. So I've been down this road, this course of medications, and nothing had worked. So I remember 6 weeks driving to see Dr. Stahl, and I'm going, holy smokes.
Something was different.
My depression was so deep and dark that I didn't even notice this beautiful weather in Southern California. Rolled down the window. I went in to see Dr. Stahl, and I said, Doc, is this what it feels like to be normal? So I still had a lot of the OCD and ruminating thoughts. Not a lot, they had decreased too. But at 9 weeks, I was like, oh my God. I was happy, I was free, I was joyous, I was so grateful, but yet I was angry that I'd lived a life of what I'd lived, of all the depression and anxiety and the OCD. So I resumed my career as a player. I ended up playing in Las Vegas in the IHL. In fact, my play had gotten so good, or back to a level where the Boston Bruins were interested in signing me and bringing me in to play. And I said, I thought about it, but I was so content. I was afraid to go back to the pressure, because pressure will cause more anxiety. And so I said, no, I'm gonna stay here. And Las Vegas tripled my contract. I had horses involved in it. And then I got into coaching, and life was good for probably, I don't remember exactly, but I'd say anyway 13, 14, 15 years just taking my medication. People should understand that with mental illness, there's a huge correlation between mental illness and addiction. And that is because whatever your choice of poison, mine was alcohol, it worked. If I was anxious, have a few beers, take the anxiety away. If I was depressed, have a few beers, you feel happy. But the problem with that is, you know, the bar gets higher. So what 2 or 3 or 4 beers would do, then it was 6 and 8, and then 10 and 12, then 16, 18. I was drinking probably 20 to 30 beers a day just to get through a day.
I know he drank, but I guess I didn't really know how much he was drinking at the time. But when people were here, it was like his quick wit and his mind, it was directed at everybody around him. But then as soon as everybody left, it was like his mind would turn on himself. He didn't have anybody to direct it at. So he directed at me and himself, and it was the same questions. Why do you love me? Are you sure you love me? Why did you marry me? You know, just the same question over and over again, and it was every single night. Start at like 11 o'clock, and he'd ask the same questions till about midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, and then he'd have so much to drink he would pass out.
People were telling Joanie, leave him, he's crazy, because I was acting crazy. I was getting arrested, I was getting fights, you know, probably because of the alcohol, and probably because my mind wouldn't turn off. Probably a lot of reasons.
And Joanie, it sounds to me like not being able to turn off those thoughts in his head, it just led Clint to a very dark place.
Well, I'd been trying to get him in to see a doctor, and nobody would see us. They would say, we don't take your insurance. We don't have any room. We don't have an appointment open, or we can see you, but we can't see you for another month or 2. He wanted to kill himself.
Joanie came home, it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'm a mess. I'm a total mess. I've been drinking. I'm going through all this craziness.
I walked into the barn, I couldn't find him, so I walked around the back of the barn. We have a tack shed out there, and he was sitting there with the gun, just sitting on the bench, just looking completely beside himself, like he couldn't turn his head off.
And I'm sweating profusely. I had my gun out. I was shooting targets.
And I remember I sat on a stool next to him and I said, "What's going on?" And he just started getting mad, saying, "What do you mean, what's going on? You have no idea what it's like to live inside my head. I can't turn it off. You know, nobody knows what it's like to live in my head."
And I said, "You don't get it. You don't understand. What I want to do is just turn this off."
And he just stood up, grabbed the gun and shoved it under his chin and said, "This is what I want to do."
I took the gun, I put it under here, and I pulled the trigger, and boom.
And I don't remember him pulling the trigger, but I remember hearing the noise of it going off.
I didn't think there was a bullet in it. I didn't know either way, and frankly, I didn't care.
And then just seeing blood come out of his nose. And just thinking right then, I gotta call somebody.
Well, when the gun went off, I thought, why am I standing? Why am I sitting? And now standing. And now why am I I didn't lose consciousness.
And I had my phone on me, so right then I called 911.
She's horrified. I just shot myself in front of her.
You know, and he sits down on a bench in front of the barn and he starts to almost pass out. So I'm yelling at 911 on the phone, and I'm shaking him, trying to get him. And he's telling me, "Don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. You're gonna be the reason I don't work in the NHL again." All of a sudden, there were just cops. And there was like 4 cops there. And I remember thinking, when he saw the cop, he was getting mad. And I thought, he's gonna make the cops mad. And he's gonna make them shoot him because it didn't work what he did. So I remember I sat next to him because I thought, well, they're not going to hurt me. So if I just stay next to him, they won't do anything and he won't get so riled up.
And that was probably the beginning of another chapter, because I didn't pass out. I was conscious for the whole deal. Well, they put me in a induced coma.
He was unconscious for a week. And I remember when they first took him in, they had said, "We're going to see if we can do surgery and try to take the bullet out." They ended up not. They left it in because they said it would do more damage than good. So I would spend every day just sitting in a chair beside him.
I was in the hospital in this coma for, I don't know, a week or two, and then I had to deal with waking up and realizing what I had done.
The minute they woke him up, the nurse looks at him and says, "Do you know why you're here?" And I think he thought he was in Buffalo from when he's cut his neck. And she flat out just told him, I was shocked. She said, "You shot yourself, you still have the bullet in your head, and that's why you're here in the hospital."
So after that physically healing, they sent me to a treatment center, and that was where I was in there for 6 months. And that was the first 2 months. I was a mean, angry SOB. I mean, I had, a lot of issues, obviously. And, I claimed all the stuff. Yeah, I drank too much. Am I an alcoholic? I guess. I don't know. But I'm just mean and angry. And I'm just like going through things like, okay, I'll claim that. But the thing was, they were trying to tell me I had post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm like, why? Why do you think that? Not a chance. Because you almost died in 1989 when your jugular vein was cut. And I'm like, yeah, I came back in 10 days. I was a hero. So the ego thing got in the way. I was really like, no way. PTSD, screw that, not a chance. And my therapist was, I don't know, she was just probably going crazy that I wouldn't acknowledge that. And once I did accept it, that's when we went through therapy and some things that I finally healed. 20 years of undiagnosed PTSD. But God, it's been a long haul, a long road of some great highs and some fantastic, dark, silent lows.
Well, that certainly had to be one of the low points in your life. So Joanie, tell me what life is like with Clint now.
It's really good. I mean, we're best friends. We get along great. He's the love of my life. We do everything together.
I don't know how she could, hang in there, but I also know that we've done everything together our whole marriage. Horses, hockey, skating, all that stuff. And she's been my support for sure.
What advice would you give people struggling with depression or mental illness?
A lot of people struggle in silence and darkness, and they don't have to. You're not alone. Get help if you need it. Go see a doctor. Go see a shrink. There's no shame. There's no shame in that. The shame is if you don't do that and you live a life of distress and not being happy. That's more shameful than getting help or admitting that you need help.
Clint, Joanie, thank you so much.